If you regularly doubt your own memory, wonder if you're too sensitive, or feel confused after arguments, you may be experiencing something very specific. The common assumption is gaslighting is just disagreeing or having a bad memory, but the research tells a more complicated and more useful story. If you actually looked closely at what is happening underneath the surface, the biggest surprise would not be how strange or rare this is. It would be how common it is, and how clear the psychology behind it actually becomes once you see it. So rather than stopping at the symptom, let us trace it back to where it actually starts and what is keeping it in place. The pattern usually starts before the person notices anything is wrong. Gaslighting is a pattern of psychological manipulation, where one person systematically causes another to question their own memory, perception, and sanity. It is not a single incident, it is a sustained campaign. What looks like a flaw or a failure of will is usually a protection strategy that outlived its usefulness. The pattern feels normal from the inside, precisely because it has been there so long. Moments like this also reveal why simple advice rarely works. The person usually already knows what they should do. The barrier is not knowledge. It is the automatic response that fires before knowledge can arrive. This is where the psychological reality diverges most sharply from the cultural story. The popular framing puts it in the wrong category entirely, which is why the usual solutions do not touch it. Researchers have mapped the underlying mechanism with a fair amount of precision. The technique works by exploiting the brain's natural tendency to trust familiar people over its own memory. When someone close to us confidently contradicts our recollection, the brain begins to doubt itself. This is an automatic process, not a deliberate one. That distinction matters enormously for how you try to change it. That biological clarity matters more than it might seem. It reframes the question from "what is wrong with me" to "what is this doing and why?" This is where the psychological reality diverges most sharply from the cultural story. The popular framing puts it in the wrong category entirely, which is why the usual solutions do not touch it. What looks minor from the outside often carries enormous weight from the inside. That is why the science deserves more attention than the surface-level version of this conversation usually gives it. This is the part that most self-help advice skips entirely. Gaslighting is most common in relationships where one person has a strong need for control: romantic partners, family members, or managers who cannot tolerate being questioned or held accountable. This is not about blame. It is about understanding which conditions shape the nervous system and why it responds the way it does. That history does not excuse the behavior, but it does explain it. An explanation is where change usually starts. What looks minor from the outside often carries enormous weight from the inside. That is why the root cause deserves more attention than the surface-level version of this conversation usually gives it. Seen up close, the root cause is not just a symptom. It is a window into the whole system. Address only the surface behavior and the underlying driver, will simply find another outlet. Most people can recognize this once someone names it, even if they never had language for it before. Classic tactics include flat denial of events that happened, reframing the victim as emotionally unstable, recruiting others to validate the manipulator's version, and minimizing every concern with phrases like "you're overreacting." The internal experience and the external behavior often look like completely different things. Both are part of the same pattern. The behavior will keep repeating until the need underneath it is addressed directly. Seen up close, the how it shows is not just a symptom. It is a window into the whole system. Address only the surface behavior and the underlying driver will simply find another outlet. That is why understanding the how it shows matters beyond the surface level. It is part of the actual mechanism driving the behavior, not just context around it. Left unaddressed, the pattern does not stay contained to the original area of life. Long-term gaslighting causes severe erosion of confidence, chronic anxiety, and detachment from one's own judgment. Victims often cannot make simple decisions because they no longer trust themselves. What starts as a coping mechanism often becomes the source of the very problem it was designed to avoid. This is why the stakes are higher than they first appear. The pattern affects not just one area but the whole fabric of daily life. That is why understanding the impact matters beyond the surface level. It is part of the actual mechanism driving the behavior, not just context around it. If you slow the pattern down, it becomes easier to read. Most people are not choosing this consciously. They are running a program that was written before they had any say in it. Change in this area is possible, but it requires working with the mechanism rather than against it. Recovery requires external anchors, a trusted person, a written record, or a therapist who can reflect accurate reality back. The goal is not to convince the gaslighter, it is to reconnect with your own perception. The goal is not to eliminate the pattern, but to expand the repertoire so there are more options available in the moment. The research is clear that change is possible. The harder part is believing that before you have evidence of it. If you slow the pattern down, it becomes easier to read. Most people are not choosing this consciously. They are running a program that was written before they had any say in it. Seen as a whole pattern, gaslighting. When someone makes you question your own reality, stops looking like a character flaw and starts reading like a learned response that can be unlearned. Reality is not negotiable. If someone consistently makes you feel like your perceptions are broken, the problem is not your perception. The past shaped the pattern. That is not a reason for resignation. It is exactly the kind of information that makes real change possible. When you name the pattern instead of just feeling it, the whole experience becomes